As I run along this beach, it's hard to realize that only 4 months before I'd quit, I'd finally left the ranks of the so-called corporate organization. I'd started with nothing but 15 hours a day, 7 days a week for 15 years, and a lot of luck had given me Ferraris, Rolls-Royces, and all those things. But I was tired. I was tired of the perpetual treadmill. I'd always wanted to be a writer, sailor, photographer. Many times I thought about quitting to go out to try it, but the big money and obligations kept me locked in, and maybe I didn't have the guts to quit. Anyway, that's the way it was until one day I was driving to the bank to negotiate a $1 million loan. And this is the story of what happened to me on and after that day.
Happy Monday morning. This is Ralph Shea with the latest news. But first, here's a bulletin from the Highway Patrol. There is a colossal traffic jam on the Golden State Freeway at the Victory Boulevard turnoff due to construction in the 2 center lanes. Drivers are requested to use alternate routes until noon today. And now the news. The White House has announced that the cost of living index for the past month has increased only 16% on a revised annualized basis. But the announcement went on to say, it is anticipated that this increase, when revised to a quarterly basis and then annualized, should show an annual decrease of 0.1% for the same period as the last revised and adjusted period. And on this encouraging news, the stock market opened sharply down. The Dow Jones at 838 closed off 5 points from yesterday. Industrials down 6. Electronics and glamours down 9. Utilities down 2. And the U.S. dollar is off on an average of 2% against most foreign currencies. Meanwhile, the Governor's Committee for Taxation has indicated that taxes must double in the next 5 years to cover anticipated increases in welfare and unemployment benefits. Tomorrow, Congress will vote on the protection.
This is Chuck Tobias. Is my secretary there, please? Nancy, it's me. Call the bank and cancel this morning's meeting. No. Cancel them all. Nope. I'm going to sea. To heck with it. Call you tomorrow.
That's how it happened, and I never went back to the office. And soon after, we're away and bound to ancient Greece with John Slinger Riise, just out of the Navy, and his buddy from Nevada, Tom Blue Davis, also ex-Navy, now taking his first trip on a boat, and the old man of the sea who retired to make this voyage, Maynard Ackerman. And lastly but not least, Tommy. just to chip off the old block. When I was a young boy, I'd known an old Greek sailor who'd held me spellbound with his stories of the eastern Mediterranean Sea. I was especially intrigued by his descriptions of two remote and deserted places, Cleopatra's Island and Cappy Cove. He'd said that Cleopatra's Island was an ancient island city, a small unexplored ghost town more than 2,000 years old. Supposedly, Antony and Cleopatra had stayed here 30 years before the birth of Christ. And the other place, Cappy Cove, was supposed to be just the most snug and tranquil cove in the whole world. And so from my young years came what might be called a dream to see these places, and from the recent years, the compelling urge to get off the treadmill which was eating up my life like a garbage disposal. And what better way to get away than from the deck of a small boat? Now we make our way down the Pacific coast. Soon we'll pass through the Panama Canal. Then we'll head across the North Atlantic to the eastern shores of the Mediterranean Sea in Asia Minor. Our destination, Cleopatra's Island, and then to snug Cappy Cove. Almost 2 months after leaving California, we enter the first lock of the Panama Canal. And a few new friends have come along for the 50-mile ride through the canal. And there's Mar, a sturdy, waisty, wide-beamed old girl. Where yachts are sleek and feminine, she's buxom and heavy. And unlike a lot of gold-lined money boats, one look at her tells you that she'll always get you there. Water gushes into the locks from culverts as big around as a railroad car. There are 3 lifting locks on the Pacific side, which lift us 85 feet to Gatun Lake in the center of the isthmus. Not much interest in Tommy as he has it out with an egg, a piece of candy for him. This is dense jungle in the center of the isthmus, which we now cross to the lowering locks on the Atlantic side. A salute to Tommy. Just takes it all in stride. Hey, Tommy, we have a rule. If you mess up the deck, you clean it off the deck. And you're no exception. We're high in the air in a full lock, and we look down on the Atlantic out there. Well, begrudgingly, Tommy sands away to finish cleaning up his mess. In a single day, we've saved 8,000 miles. We've got the motor on as we put the last lock behind and enter the Atlantic Ocean. We're bound for the primitive and little-known San Blas Islands. These islands lie in reef-filled waters about 200 miles southeast of the canal. We sail offshore until we can find an opening through the reef to the inner islands. Once inside the reef, Slinger is high in the rigging to keep a sharp eye for coral heads, which are everywhere. Blues continuously on the depth indicator to keep a sharp eye on the depth under our keel.
4! 4! 4! Coming up 3!
These are shallow waters, and this boat draws 12 feet, so we've had a few exciting moments. It's taken us 3 days to thread our way through 26 miles of coral. That's only 8 miles a day. "600 species of fish inhabit these reefs. In the deeper waters, sharks, the scavengers of the sea, and these waters are full of them. Old-timers used to believe that if one of these things followed a ship for too long a time, that it was a sure sign of death, and they would go to almost any length to get rid of them. There are about 1,000 of these islands, remote and tropical. They belong to the primitive Kuna Indians, and only a few are inhabited. It's like a dreamer's holiday to be anchored off uninhabited islands like this. In the afternoon, while the others take a siesta, I spend many hours beachcombing along the sands of the lagoon. Must have looked something like this to Columbus when he went ashore near here in 1502. Some days when I walk along this beach, I have visions of becoming another Robinson Crusoe. The hustle and bustle I used to know seems like it happened years and years ago. It seems unreal to be in such a place with no one else around. No man-made sounds here, only the wind rustling the palms, lapping lagoon water, and the constant roar of the surf in the outer reef. These shallow waters are about 90 degrees. They're full of large shells, many of which are sacred to the Kunas. For a Kuna, this shell would be sacred. It symbolizes the womb of their great Earth Mother, from which they believe all spirits originate. I cannot leave the coconuts alone. Anyway, a little juice fresh off the tree and it's delicious. What a life. A few miles east lies inhabited Islas Pinos, Isle of Pines. It's the only sandblast island with water. All the others get their water from the mainland jungle streams. Here, Chief Aquati, the local chief who gave us permission to come ashore, monitors the coconut count with some Colombian traders. These island chiefs are powerful men. Even though these islands are part of Panama, the chiefs have absolute power over all foreigners and Kunas on their territory. They even have the right to impose the death penalty, from which there is no appeal. These people have no domesticated animals, and so eat mostly fish and fruit and whatever they can catch or hunt in the jungle. Some of the kids' pets. A 2-week-old monkey whose mother they ate. They wanted me to take this little guy back to the boat for Tommy, but I figured the competition might blow Tom's jealous mind. A 1-month-old razorback which they picked up in the jungle after they captured its mother. Every day, on the way back to the boat, we passed this woman scrubbing away as the family looked on. And we named her the Sandbloss Maytag. But later in the day, this same gal looked like several $1,000s dressed in her solid gold breastplate and colorful mola. We're going to trade some good merchandise for some molas, the brightly colored tapestries worn by these women. As they arrive, you'll notice a certain air of authority about them. Women's Libid love this place because the Kuna household is a matriarchy with final authority vested in the oldest woman in the house. A new bridegroom becomes the virtual slave of his mother-in-law. It's so bad that frequently young men are married off only after having been made drunk and caught unawares. And you guessed it, there are no mother-in-law jokes here. I'm trying to be especially accommodating to these women because I don't want them having any bad dreams about our dealings. The Kunas believe in exorcism, witchcraft, and dream crime. This literally means that a person may be found guilty and punished for any crime, including murder, which he's seen to commit in someone else's dream. Soon, all this will be gone. The missionaries are moving slowly through these islands to Christianize and civilize in the ways of the West. As we said goodbye, I wondered just how much our Western ways would really benefit them. And I kind of had the feeling that they were like babes in paradise and really didn't know it. Now Mars bound way to Grenada, the southernmost of the fabled Windward Islands of the West Indies. 12 degrees north of the equator, and all the year round bathed by the warm sun and cooled by the gentle northeast trade winds. After 11 days of punching straight into it, Grenada's over the port bow. Green mountains rising from white sand beaches, a place still isolated and not overrun by tourists. More than a mile out to sea, the smell of jasmine comes across the water. And a while later, we enter the picture book of a harbor at St. George's. We douse our sails, and look at the boys hand that sail. 4 months before, they'd never been on a boat with a piece of canvas, and now they're old salts. And this is the same waterfront where in the 1700s the likes of William Bligh of Mutiny on the Bounty and Admiral Horatio Nelson of the Victory docked and serviced their ships. Slinger's off to market. If you want an honest feeling for a new place and its people, go to its open-air market. And we know Grenada's an interesting place from some of the signs we pass along the way. But the most interesting man has to be the local funeral director. Each Christmas, he runs an ad in the paper which reads in part, "Our usual Christmas gift is once more open to you." That's his friendly mortuary sign up there, but his ad continues, "Anyone purchasing one of the new design caskets before Christmas will be given 1 case whiskey free. Come in and select." And painted on the side of a Grenadian hearse, "Why live in misery and unhappiness when you can be buried in comfort and joy?" I almost ran out and bought me one. And Grenadian buses. And look at that color. What a collection of goods and people. Almost everything grows here without cultivation. Breadfruit, bananas, cashews, limes, lemons, mangoes, black pepper, cinnamon, ginger, cloves, nutmeg, cocoa. You just pick them when they're ripe. You can buy a 4-foot stick of bananas for 50 cents. It's interesting to think that back in the 12th century, 1 pound of nutmeg cost 3 sheep or half a cow. So prices for spices are coming down. Like on all boats, there's work to do. And recently, Tommy's showing a propensity for art.
Lunch, Slinger. Come and get it.
The first stroke's to be a kiss to the canvas.
How's the painting coming out there, Slinger?
The white looks pretty good. The red should be finished in about an hour.
And now, the final stroke. Time to move north, up the Windward and Leeward Islands of the West Indies to Antigua, our departure point for crossing the North Atlantic. Perfect sailing. The sun's shining, the spray flying, the trade's blowing a steady 20 knots in the beam. In all those places where the magic sound and names fall abaft our starboard quarter. Kickham, Jenny, St. Vincent, St. Lucia, Martinique, Dominique, Guadeloupe. And a few days later, with a steady 8 knots on the log, we raise Antigua over the bow. Here we take on stores and go to work on the long list of things to do. There's lots of preparation for a voyage across an ocean, and a little varnish prevents rust. You never know what lies ahead, but between the extremes of disaster and pleasant sailing are a whole range of conditions for which we prepare. And weeks later, Slinger finishes the final chore before departure. Well, in old tall ship's jargon, we've rattled into chain, and ahead lies the great North Atlantic. Soon we'll be isolated from the rest of the world, completely dependent upon the integrity of this little vessel, the benevolence of the wind, and our own strength and skill. It's the middle of May, and during the first 5 or 6 days, we'll stand well to the north to pick up the westerlies to carry us across the Atlantic. In these modern days, this is a lonely stretch of ocean. Steamships follow more direct routes, which are hundreds of miles away from these now empty sea lanes of the old tall ships. Antigua falls behind as we head north through the weird Sargasso Sea, the supposed home of sea monsters and derelict ships drifting endlessly in seaweed. Our planned track will take us across the center of the infamous Bermuda Triangle, then east to the small island of Fayal in the Azores. This is a sailing distance of about 2,300 miles. Each day begins with a 7:45 call to the forenoon watch.
Rise and shine, rise and shine. What's happiness? What's happiness?
Rising and shining and sailing rough weather.
We're divided into two watches and we call them port and starboard. Each stands 4 hours on, then has 4 hours off. And so it goes day and night, 7 days a week until we reach our destination. The first few days are always the toughest. It takes time to readjust to the motion of the boat and the routine of getting up in the middle of every night for those 4 long hours. At the end of each 4-hour watch, the off-going watch passes along any special instructions to the oncoming watch.
10 o'clock, Chuck wants us to change course to 010. The wind gets up and he's asleep, give him a call.
At precisely every hour on the hour, we enter in the ship's log the distance traveled during the preceding hour, the course steered, and note briefly the wind and the weather. That's a recording barograph, which records the barometric pressure. Once you've learned how to interpret that graph, you can predict all kinds of things about the local weather. Then we're down to the engine room to check the bilges for water. And while we're there, a turn or two in the propeller shaft greasing system. Even though the engine isn't running, this keeps a tight seal between us and the outside sea. Back to the wheel for 1 hour, and this procedure is repeated every hour on the hour 24 times a day. First days are warm and balmy. We spread all the canvas we can carry, and with a tilted deck, we roll on mile after mile. And it's exhilarating to be driven by the silent machinery of sail, using only the wind for fuel. Contrary to what you'd think, there's always lots to do, like wetting down the decks 3 times a day. This keeps the seams tight so they won't leak when the weather's bad. And in addition to 2 meals a day, Maynard bakes 3 loaves of delicious saltwater bread every afternoon. The chores done, we find some time to relax. We're thinking about dropping Tommy off at Monte Carlo. And in my journal for today, I write only 2 lines. The sea is teaching me how little I need, not how much. The next morning, and we've just finished baiting one of the fish lines, or meat lines as we call them, with a flying fish that flew aboard last night. Slinger thinks he's got some action, but he thinks that every time he sits back here. He's got one this time, and a big one. Look at that.
Wait a minute.
Look at the size of him. And he couldn't have come at a better time because we've had to dump a lot of our meat.
Get back towards there.
Don't want to lose him. No, Tommy, that's not for you. We haven't dropped the sails or slowed down, and it's a job hauling him aboard. It's good there are no sharks around, or they'd have had him or a big piece of him by now. blue marlin, and he's darn near 10 feet long. There's a tranquility at sea of a quality that's unknown to the land, especially at twilight, which can be an intensely personal time. And certainly, the loneliness of an ocean breeds humility. Lavish sunsets, especially between the tropics of Cancer and Capricorn. Out here, there's only the sky and the sea. There's nothing else to take our attention from the crazy colors splashed across that western sky at the end of each day. And soon after, night comes to brood over the sea, and we roll on with all sail set. Times like this, I'm glad I'm out here, even though sometimes I wonder about the future. Some people call this escape, but I don't see the sea as an escape. It's a challenge, an adventure, a kind of revival of the past, or maybe the quality of life was better because it was less regimented. Dawn of a new day. Each morning, that sun kicks out the loneliness that comes with every night in the sea. A few hours later, morning sun time. And it's really quite simple to use the sun and the stars to find your way around the world. With a sextant, we measure the angle of the sun above the horizon, and since it's constantly changing, we must note the exact time of the measurement. In the afternoon, we do the same thing. Then we enter the tables in a couple of books, and in cookbook fashion extract the numbers we need. Then some simple calculations with nothing more than addition and subtraction. These calculations indicate where and what lines to draw on a chart, and a few lines later, we have a fix. And our fix shows us to be in the center of the mysterious Bermuda Triangle, where ships disappear, compasses go wild, and airplanes go down and are never seen again. A flight of 5 TBM Avengers which vanished on December 5th, 1945. They radioed that their compasses were going crazy and the sun didn't look as it should. An intensive search found no trace of the 14 crewmen and the planes. The USS Cyclops at 309 aboard, and the Marine Sulphur Queen with a crew of 39 in 1963. And the most famous mystery ship of them all, the Marie Celeste, found luffing under full sail, a meal still on the captain's table, and everybody gone. We never talk about bad weather or sailing across the Bermuda Triangle, and we claim we're not superstitious. Yet there's a tacit understanding that the elements may take a damaging interest in our little ship if we alert them through idle chatter on the subject, and so we're silent. Nevertheless, the barometer's falling fast, the air smells heavy, and spume is beginning to fly off the tops of these long-crested rollers, which have behind them all the fetch and power of 1,000 miles of open sea. These are the seas of the Bermuda Triangle. There is nothing on the land to compare with a storm in the sea. There is absolutely no place of refuge, no place to hide. One has no choice but to face the elements, and the nightmare they can create can seem to last forever. These seas bounce 100 tons around like a piece of cork. This is one time I'd rather be on a freeway. Second day, the entire horizon blacks out ahead. Momentarily, the wind drops, and we button everything up to await the deluge, which will soon start. For 6 hours, it rains so hard that the seas are knocked almost flat. Nothing more wet and lonely than to sit out here on this deck in this weather at that point. The next afternoon, the front passes with a wind shift to the north. The wind and the sea still run high. Now an endless succession of hollows and ridges come at us over the bow. Everyone's hungry, tired, and wet. You can't sit, stand, sleep, or eat without being bounced or dropped in midair as the deck flies with the waves. After a while, this kind of weather becomes painfully frustrating. But the old tall ships had a rhyme for this. Roll, roll, and stop the pitch. Oh, damn your soul, the more you pitch, the less you'll roll. You take a boat across an ocean. She'd better be strong. 5 days later, things are quieter. We're now north and east of the Bermuda Triangle, with nothing to report except the bad weather, at the end of which our most distinguished cook got sick. When paying his respects to Poseidon, that old Greek god of the sea, he drank too much of the most vulgar, strongly scented, and powerful Jamaica rum, which almost at once laid him flat. Finally, on the 16th day, a land bird over the stern. Fayel, our landfall in the Azores. A good feeling comes over a little ship at a time like this. one of total relaxation and accomplishment. Using only the wind, some canvas, some rope, and our hands, we've moved Mara across an ocean. In old sea jargon, the first thing we do is splice the main brace, which means take a drink. And that flat deck felt good. With all the water conservation at sea, Tommy hasn't had a good washing for weeks, and he sure doesn't like this one. This is called Ring Around the Bathtub. In addition to a lot of other things, Tommy hates soap. One time he got into a case and threw 48 bars over the rail before we caught him. We were out of soap for 11 days, and that's not too good in the tropics.
Hold still, Tommy, and you won't get soap in your eyes. Come on, Tommy. Dry yourself off.
The bath over. Now, ecstasy in motion. Now, some people take sleeping pills. Tommy takes lifesavers.
Okay, one more, Tommy, then you gotta hit the rack.
Regular playtime before bedtime. Once you can get him turned off, he's usually good for 8 hours, but he must be tired or else. At last, the first night of quiet rest in 16 days. Well, the next morning, Tommy sleeps as we lie below in the small port of Horta, huddled at the base of this now extinct volcano from which this island was formed. This crater's more than a mile across and 1,300 feet deep. Things haven't always been so tranquil, even as recently as 1957 at the north end of the island. 450 earthquakes in 3 days. 500 houses destroyed. A miracle no one was killed. Ox carts, oil lamps, and work have produced a people with a tough and determined temperament, but still gentle in their ways. They're peasants and fishermen whose life is still as simple and uncomplicated as it was 300 years ago. These are people who still regard the soil and the sea as the source of their life. The Azores are beautiful with the romantic beauty that happens to places only when they're off the beaten track. Everywhere, nature's unspoiled. A natural garden where wildflowers bloom on every cliff, every road, and every hill. And look at the hydrangeas. Instead of fences, hedgerows of hydrangeas separate the peasants' fields. carpet of wildflowers more than a mile long for the procession of the Feast of Corpus Christi. And the band's music isn't exactly the speech of angels, but they're working on it. The Azorians are deeply religious. In August on Fayal at the Festa di Guia, the whaleboats and the whalemen are blessed at a ceremony on the beach to where this procession now moves. The whaleboat captain will take the harpoon line and wrap it symbolically around the shoulders of the icon. Then he'll softly pray for God's help in finding whales and for God's protection after he's found them. Many lives are still lost in the hunt for the unpredictable sperm whale, as evidenced by this broken whaleboat outside the repair shop. Inside, the blacksmith straightens a toggle-headed harpoon, which is identical to that invented by the American Negro Lewis Temple in 1848. The Azorians still hunt the sperm whale using techniques in fragile open boats which are almost identical to those used in the days of Moby Dick 300 years ago. They hunt without modern aids or mechanical protection, no explosive heads, no helicopters, no powered harpoons. They battle the giant whale with nothing more than a puny hand-thrown harpoon and a hand lance. This is incredibly dangerous, and it's cost many whalers their lives. There are 6 lookouts around the coast, and during all the daylight hours, they scan the ocean for the telltale blow of the sperm whale. Sometimes they sit here for months without ever spotting one whale. The whalers are older men. This is all they know. There are no young whalers. The changing times are giving the young men new opportunities. The lookout spotted a whale. Now the signal rocket to call the men to launch the boats. This launch will meet the canoe outside the seawall and take it in tow. The lookout on the hill gives steering directions. When the launch is within a mile or so of the whales, the canoe will cast off and row the remaining distance. These whaleboats are a fine boat for good weather, but here the weather can change quickly. Not too long ago, 3 boats were caught by bad weather, and one by one, monstrous seas smashed each boat as relatives stood helplessly on this beach and watched all 21 of their kin drown. For almost 300 years, whaling has helped some Azorians to survive. For these men, it's not a sport, and they don't know a darn thing about ecology. This is a small village effort and the only way which they have to supplement their meager incomes. The whales take the squid and these men some whales, on the average of 40 or so a year, which certainly doesn't endanger a species. Not like the slaughter cycle perpetrated by the Soviets and the Japanese, whose modern scientific debauchery claims more than 50,000 whales a year. Now, this old launch takes them in tow to the general area of the whales. These whalemen look like a band of desperados from the early American West. But to the contrary, they're shy and gentle, something you rarely find in men with hardy and hazardous occupations like they have. The spouts of the whales are seen ahead. There's a lot of tension now. Sperm whale behavior can be diabolical and unpredictable. The captain told me of an encounter of a few weeks back with a gigantic whale. It had bitten a boat in half and killed 2 men.
All the men is in the water.
and the whale he take one man in his mouth. The other man, he tried to take the man from the whale. And the whale, he take this man in his mouth too. And the both men is died.
They cast off the tow line, and soon they start to pull with all their strength. They must quickly move to within harpoon throwing distance, which is only 8 to 10 feet from the whale. Roberto takes his position with the harpoon. The Ahab comes out of the captain as he yells and screams and urges them to pull harder, faster, more. Get the belay and get the whale. For the family, for the children, pull harder. They glide swiftly toward the whale. There's two whales. One sounds. The other's still on the surface. He starts the harpoon. Must stay clear of that tail. One hit would shatter the boat. Now we're off in what the old-timers called a Nantucket sleigh ride. Sometimes miles to sea at speeds up to 18 knots. The harpoon line whips around the loggerhead and out of the tub. Can't get tangled in that line or you're gone. He sounds, and look at the tail over the boat. Now the men will wait and watch, sometimes 5 minutes, sometimes 30. These creatures are the greatest divers in nature and are known to do battle with gigantic squid 3,500 feet deep. 10 minutes later, he's on his way up. They take in the slack line to the harpoon. The harpoon doesn't kill the whale. Its purpose is to fasten a line from the boat to the whale. The whale is then killed with a lance after it tires and comes to the surface. He's on the surface. Now comes the greatest danger, as they must repeatedly go in for the kill with a hand-thrown lance. Sometimes the whale will come straight back at the whaleboat and try to destroy it, as happened a few weeks back. So it goes until it's all over. Gear stowed away, the whale will be towed back to the factory, and the launch tows the canoe back to the village. It's been a long day. This all started 14 hours earlier. The next morning at the whale factory, the villagers go to work cleansing the whale. Nothing is wasted. Fishermen even scrape off the outer skin, or black skin as they call it, to be used for bait. The first step, a circular cut is made to sever the head. Fortunately, in another year or so, this factory will be closed. There are no young men to man the boats, and the surviving old-timers are retiring. On a misty morning, days later, we pass the boathouse. And I think of these men who hunt the sperm whale like the sperm whale hunts the squid. And I knew that I'd been witness to a small segment of nature's predatory cycle. And I knew also that I'd been in the company of some very brave men. Now Mars stands out from the Azores, bound way to Gibraltar, about 1,000 miles due east from here on the southwest corner of Europe. About 7 days under sail, and the first days are cold and the sea choppy. Toward the end of our 5th day, we're close to Gibraltar. The sky's clear, but the seas are still choppy. Somewhere along here, we've crossed the tracks of all the great sailors known to history, and yet there's nothing to show that they were ever here. Man's never left his mark upon the sea as he has the scarred and battered land. That sea looks the same to us as it did to them. Gibraltar, the Pillars of Hercules, as the Greeks called the gateway to the Mediterranean. Now Mars sails upon this timeless sea bound for Malta, a tiny island country 50 miles south of Sicily. From this sea has come all of our religion, our law, almost all of our arts, our alphabet. It's been said that everything that sets us above savages has come to us from the shores of this sea. We prepare to enter that old island fortress where sandstone walls are wrapped around magnificent natural harbors. Here was the home of the Knights of Malta, who built her massive fortifications during the Crusader Wars in the 15th century. We finally figured out a way to babysit Tommy. We drag him on a line behind the boat. Found a way back aboard. Now Blue's gonna catch it for a while.
Get out of here, Tommy.
Many a bloody battle was fought around this harbor. The most recent was during World War II, when sometimes this place was hit by 100 air raids a day. The scars of that war can still be seen on the pockmarked faces of buildings and walls. Again, all is quiet, and once more these harbors are the home of her fishing fleet and small pleasure craft. Down the way, more maintenance aboard Mar. The sea makes work in everything it touches. We had lots to do, and a couple of friends offered to give us a hand for a few days in return for food and bunk. It was good to see them both again, but for some reason, I couldn't get Max's attention. An hour later, we had his mind on other things and set him up for a little surprise. Now, I have a friend on another boat who has a cheetah named Fifi, and we've agreed to take Fifi with us for a while. But Maltese quarantine regulations make it necessary to transfer Fifi by boat. Meanwhile, poor old Max works away in the sander and has no idea. As we later told Max, Fifi wouldn't harm a mouse. She was raised on milk. To which he replied, yeah, so was I, but now I eat meat. The next day, we're underway to take a look at a shipwreck off the little island of Camino, close to Malta's north coast. That's her mast sticking out of the water. On with the cumbersome gear. It's hot as heck until you can get to the water. Meanwhile, the dive master checks things out, and we're soon ready. We swim straight down toward her bow. She lies in shallow water, the bow's in about 40 feet and the stern in about 80. There's always something ghostly about approaching a sunken ship, especially when she's in good shape like this and still looks like a ship. She's only been on the bottom for 6 years, but already her hull's collapsed midships. She was the Popey, the 470-ton cargo vessel. Her manifest showed that she carried several million cigarettes when she was caught close to shore and driven aground by a fast-moving storm. She had cleared Grand Harbor and had given her next destination as North Africa. Now, Grand Harbor's only 20 miles from here, and she sank 2 days after clearing Grand Harbor. The big question, why had it taken her 2 days to travel the 20 miles from Grand Harbor to here? The locals seemed to think that she was smuggling, and that's why she was caught in so close to shore when the weather took a sudden turn. Forward to the forecastle. It's eerie in here, pitch black. I can feel broken metal, and the creaking and the groaning make me uneasy. I get the feeling this thing could collapse. Good judgment tells me to get out of here, and we leave the Popey. On our way back to Malta, mischievous Tommy checks to see if the coast is clear before he starts to terrorize poor Fifi again. Clean-up time in Malta, again featuring Tommy and his climbing rigging act. Malta has a lot of interesting fjords. And before leaving, we want to look at the sea life around the base of this one.
Let him go, Slinger!
We go in bow first to check for rocks to make sure that there's nothing to hit the prop when we swing the boat round with her stern to the cliff. We're going to take some lights down with us. The true colors of much of the plant life in deeper waters are bright and lavish, yet the seawater above them acts as a filter to color, so we see only blues and greens. Unless we take artificial light down with us, and then look how the seabed lights up. But I've always been puzzled as to why nature's colored so many fish to match the colors of their environment, when supposedly fish, like humans, can't see these colors anyway. We swim deeper, and at the base of the cliff, in about 70 feet of water, is a large opening that leads under the cliff. And we start to swim in. We can't see 6 inches without lights, but even in this darkness, the walls are covered with color. Moraines, a whole wall full. Put your hand in one of those mouths in the dark and you'll know it. A bit later, we swim to the top of the cave, and to our surprise, we break the surface and find that we're inside a cavern, inside the cliff 150 feet above us, and there's air in here. Like swimming in a huge well inside the earth. We bring in a plastic raft to paddle around inside the earth. We're likely the first who have been in here and has probably never seen light. This is real isolation, the exit to the outside world 70 feet under us. There's the engine. The prearranged signal to come out if the wind should shift, a problem for us with a boat so close to the cliff. Slinger rolls out to swim down through the exit below. We'll leave the raft. Takes too long to deflate. Out with the lights. And everything's return to the darkness is probably known for thousands of years. Maybe one day, we'll get back to pick up our raft, which now floats inside the earth. Malta to Corinth, about 800 miles. Not too great a journey for us, but quite an undertaking for the few ancients who dared venture this far. Ancient Corinth stood on an isthmus which controlled trade between Greece and Asia Minor and made her the world's wealthiest city in the days of antiquity. Mar motors through the 3-mile-long Corinth Canal. This thing is cut through solid rock, some places 250 feet deep. On leaving the canal, we make ready to sail on the blue Aegean, that island-studded sea of the Greek archipelago. Slinger goes to work on the topping lift, the line that lifts the main boom out of its resting position in the boom cradle aft. And Blue makes fast on the sheet to hold the boom secure until we can get the press of a sail on. Then Slinger hauls way in the main halyard, hoisting the head of that heavy sail 70 feet up the mainmast. Why, he's developed muscles he didn't even know he had. Like the old ships on the way to Asia Minor, we'll stop in the center of the Aegean at the small and barren island of Delos. At one time, Delos was a place of immense wealth and the mythical birthplace of the Greek god Apollo. A little affection to gentle Fifi before jealous Tommy gets back. Why, in the jungle, he wouldn't dare come within 1,000 yards of her. Leave her ears alone, Tommy. Just look at how he likes to keep Fifi and I apart. Tommy. Uh-oh. This is gonna get me a roughing up. When Tom's hair stands straight up. That's not the wind blowing. He's mad. Over the bow, Delos, as the legendary dolphins of the Aegean bid us welcome. Everywhere in the Aegean, the light has a special and rare character. From the tiniest ripples to the bare and brown earth and the white marble which on Delos lies everywhere. This row of lionesses adorned the great boulevard of the city, which more than 2,500 years ago ran along one edge of a sacred lake which stood here. Broken marble strewn everywhere, the hills are dotted with the ruins of temples and houses, now standing like bleached bones in the sun. Everywhere on Delos, the past is before you, and it's vivid because nothing has been placed here for 2,000 years. It's remained uninhabited during all the years since its life ended. Now sheep graze through the remnants of glory. No one's lived here for 2,000 years, except now there's a caretaker and an occasional passing shepherd or fisherman. Like them, I draw cool drinking water from the well in front of the house of Cleopatra. I'm thinking to myself how incredible it is that we can still draw water from a well that's been continuously quenching the thirst of humans for 1,849 years. Around the corner, the theater of Delos, which accommodated 5,500 spectators back in the year 300 BC. They cleverly used it to catch water, which they drain into this water reservoir. At one time, its 8 arches supported a roof. This was a luxury hotel, and this was its water reservoir. As a religious sanctuary, Delos never had any defenses. One day in 88 BC, a king from Asia Minor attacked and destroyed the island. Her screaming population was dragged through these streets. In a single day, he slaughtered all 20,000 inhabitants, and the island never recovered. Scattered implements for living are strewn about and abandoned, as they were on the island's last day of life. Along the walls, nooks for votive offerings and oil lamps which lighted the streets at night. The courtyards around which the houses were built. In these places, the women of wealthy families spent much of their time doing the same things women still do today. The courtyard floors in the houses of the rich were decorated in intricate mosaics whose motif usually depicted the occupation of the owner. Here, a boy and a dolphin. In the days of antiquity, the owner of this house was probably a powerful ship owner. Today, we know nothing about him, not even his name. It's early morning as I walk along the path leading to the top of Mount Kinthos. For 3,000 years, men have walked along this same path called the Sacred Way and mounted the same stairs to the summit. Ancient mythology tells us that it was from here that Zeus, king of the gods, watched the birth of his son Apollo, the favorite god of the Greeks. The Greeks loved all their gods because they weren't perfect gods. Their gods were involved in politics, intrigue, love affairs, and so on. They were like humans and made mistakes. Sometimes it's hard to realize that the ancient Greeks were people just like us. They passed this way and had a good time. A place like Delos has a sobering effect. Standing here, one can't help thinking of life and of death. For me, the silence from those vivid ruins below is a compelling reminder of how little time is given us as it was them, before others follow to take our place. Life's a short trip. That's the message of Delos. "10 miles to the north of silent Delos lies magical Mykonos, bright, white, cheerful, the Capri of the Aegean, the most completely beautiful and enchanting town in this sea and maybe the world." Planned only a day here for food and water, and again stayed a month. Mykonos, the most whitewashed town in the Aegean. 360 churches and chapels, some built by Greek pirates who I suppose were trying to buy a place in heaven. But her enchantment lies in her little streets. They wander in every direction, all dazzling white, everywhere white. And a cat lover walks out of her way to gently kick it. They use their boats called kayakis for fishing and hauling cargo. Certainly the kayaki is to the Greek what the ark was to Noah. By mid-morning, the day's catch is in, and the fishermen congregate at their favorite taverna along the curving quayside of the harbor. And famous Peter the Pelican and fisherman Theodore, who found him as a baby on the beach and raised him as the mascot of Mykonos. Now, Peter doesn't like cigarette smokers, and he hates cigar smokers even more. He not only dislikes cigarettes, but he also gets upset when people take pictures of him with tripod-mounted cameras. Maybe to him it looks like another pelican. For 20 minutes, this man tried for a picture and finally was beaten away. All he had to do was to take his camera off the tripod. A month later, we're finally way to the coast of Asia Minor and Cleopatra's Island along the seashore of the eastern Mediterranean Sea. But along the way, we fall in with some Greek sponge divers. At their invitation, we decide to tag along with them for a while. We've also added Tammy to the crew. She's from Singapore and wanted to see Turkey. For Tommy, it was love at first sight. We're stopped to put a diver down. Greek divers bid goodbye to their families and wander about the Aegean for 6 to 8 months of every year. Theirs is the hardest life in a part of the world where life is tough. There are 4 divers on the boat, and they rotate all day long for about 12 hours each day. This is the way they clean sponges. Squeeze the milk out with the bare feet, then hang over the side and the water does the rest. Most of these divers use crude homemade diving apparatus, and every year they pay a high price and lost lives in the crippling bends. Many of them refuse to decompress after deep dives, and instead rely on their own silly theories like Peter just coming to the surface. He believed that so long as bubbles remained attached to his suit on the way up, he couldn't get the bends. This is Peter coming up from 200 feet. His 3rd dive for the day over 160 feet without decompression. And again, Peter, who a few days after this picture died of the bends. And little did we know that this, his wife's last goodbye, would really be the last. Yanni's up with a fish, never misses. The menu is simple. Fish, potatoes, bread, a little wine, and sometimes more fish. Dining's on the bare deck aft, where the helmsman stands all day in his bare feet. They want me to go down to try my luck. We've had a friendly wager as to who can get the most sponges in the shortest time. My scuba tanks give me more mobility than his air hose, which keeps him close to the boat. We find our first sponge right under the boat, and he shows me how to get it off. We soon have it, but he's a problem with something and decides to go up, and I'm off on my own. No good. It doesn't return to shape when it's squeezed. The curious fish follow me, just like the Pied Piper. Then I find my first good one and spot a bunch more near it. And before too long, I'm on my way to the surface with a bag full of sponges. The captain's tough old hand tells me I graduated. A little wine with another fish dinner hot off the stove. That 55-gallon drum sawed in half and set on the deck in a sandbox. We all sit round the rail on the quarterdeck of this tired old girl and start our slow dinner. We talk until sunset and then to bed on the deck under a blanket of stars. And they do this every day, 7 days a week, 4 weeks a month for 7 months a year, and they're happy if they make $200 in a good month. In the early morning, we're away on the final leg to Cleopatra's Island. We'll soon get a look at that place I'd heard about so many years before through the stories of my old Greek friend. There it is, Cleopatra's Island. But from here, it looks like there's nothing on it. But in closer, ruins right down to the beach. This place has no recorded history. Everything except its name and the fact that it once existed has been lost through time. Only 800 yards long and 400 wide, he'd said, and that's all it is. The water's crystal clear. We poke our bow almost to the beach. On our way in, we glide over what looks like an underwater canyon. Then closer to the beach, I spot some evenly spaced piles of stones, which we'll come back to look at later. Totally deserted. No one else here. We have this place all to ourselves. Pieces of cut and carved stone from what must have been public buildings and temples lie scattered everywhere. On this plain, they probably grew their food. And back in the days of early American log fortresses, these walls of perfectly cut and fitted stone had already been standing for over 2,000 years. From high on the wall, we spot a small amphitheater in a hollow in the woods. I'm astonished that such a tiny island should have had its own theater with a seating capacity of perhaps 3,000. Narrow oaks grow between the stone seats, and Slinger spots the only inhabitant, a small land tortoise. No one else here. We've anchored Mar over the piles of stones we'd seen on the way in and go down to take a look. But these piles of stones aren't stones at all. They're stacks of shards, broken pieces of ancient pottery. All these appear to be fragments from amphora, which were the containers of antiquity. These things are usually found scattered about ancient wrecks, but these are piled too high to have been a wreck. And so another mystery for this tiny island. Slinger and I swim around a small point to an underwater meadow. We start searching the grass for any old relics that might be stuck in the seabed. Then there in front of us is the exposed neck of an amphora half buried in the weeds. We ever so carefully start to dig around it with our knives. We get it loose and head to the surface with a 2,000-year-old jug. The Greeks and the Romans used these to transport grain, wine, olive oil, preserved fish, and so on, and their ships carried their provisions in them. A change of tanks, and then down to look at that underwater canyon we'd seen on the way in. Over the edge, and there it is, a wide crevice in the seabed, and I start slowly down. Under the sea lies a different world, really the last frontier on Earth. Here's a virgin territory filled with exotic forms of life and penetrating silence where the loudest sound is a diver's own breathing. It's a place of shimmering light and weightlessness where man moves as nimbly as a fish. A world where things don't move, but flow as gracefully as a waltz to the music of Strauss. Rum time. Always at sunset, a few jiggers of rum with a touch of coke. Our last night at Cleopatra's Island. Tomorrow, we sail south and east to Cappy Cove. Look at that drive. That's drive for you. It doesn't deter him one bit. South and east of Cappy Cove, the most snug and tranquil cove in the whole world, I've been told. But my old friend had seen it 60 years before, and maybe things had changed. Our billowing sails spread their bellies to catch the morning wind. They're like a set of wings that have brought us to the sea of my boyhood dreams. For me, a fairy tale's come true, and I know I'm a lucky man. At one time, this old coast was part of Greece, later Rome, now it's Turkey. If you're fascinated by ghost towns and shipwrecks, then this place will hold you spellbound. Its deserted coasts are covered with the wrecks and the ruins of entire civilizations. We spot our first landmark on our way into Cappy Cove. Soon we make our turn to the east and glide down a long, tranquil bay. An hour later, we find the narrow entrance to Cappy Cove, as the point at its opening slips past our pin rail. It's almost too small to turn. We come round to starboard and get set with the anchor. Let her go, Slinger! Reverse the engine to run out some chain. Can't go very far here, not much room. Far enough. Now a little forward and we stir up the bottom, which is just inches under the keel. This would be a pretty place to go around. After we tucked everything away, I climbed the mountain and took it all in. The blue Aegean on the horizon, beyond the green forest. And down below Mar, finally lying at anchor in Cappy Cove. This really was the most snug and tranquil I'd ever seen. We passed the days swimming, reading, exploring, and we find some old Roman ruins ashore and in the water which don't amount to much. But the thing here is the solitude and the quietness. It's so quiet, it's almost palpable. You can feel it. What a contrast to the overcrowded cities, the freeways, taxes, inflation, and the daily dose of bad news. Time for dinner, a big spaghetti dinner on our last night. And we've taken Tommy's for a few minutes because the rogue took some food from the table before we all sat down. How would you like to have that staring at you every night? Looking for his coat. We've spent the last 2 months teaching him table manners and how to eat with a fork, and he's finally got it down. Watch those eyes when he sees that Coke. And he's willing to bite himself to protect that Coke. Takes his Coke straight ever since a chimp pal of his became an alcoholic. Spaghetti, Coke, and rice. What a dinner. Give me a kiss, Tommy. Each morning like a model ship on a miniature pond. Time to leave this tranquil place. I had a full heart as this old coast dropped away behind. I'd wanted simplicity, freedom, adventure. I'd found them all on the sea. Those great lines from John Masefield started to run through my head. And I knew that I'd never return to the life I'd left behind. For now, I too was caught up in the way of the wind.
I must go down to the seas again. To the lonely sea in the sky. And all I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer her by. And the wheels kick and the wind's song and the white sail shaking and a gray mist on the sea's face and a gray dawn breaking. I must go down to the seas again, for the call of the running tide is a wild call and a clear call that may not be denied. And all I ask is a windy day with the white clouds flying and the flung spray and the blown spume and the seagulls cry. I must go down to the seas again, to the vagrant gypsy life, to the gull's way and the whale's way, where the wind's like a whetted knife. And all I ask is a merry yarn from a laughing fellow rover, and quiet sleep, and a sweet dream when the long trick's over.